After 14 years of believing their mother had coldly abandoned them, the Dawson family finally uncovered the horrifying truth. Catherine had been held captive by a ruthless criminal organization, forced to work off an impossible debt while her family fractured in her absence. Now, as they closed in on rescuing her, they believed nothing could stand in the way of their reunion. But they were about to discover that finding their mother would expose just how deeply entangled she had become in this criminal world, and the true nightmare she had been living. Before we dive into part 2 of this shocking story, let us know where you're watching from today. And if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. Ethan and his family were still in the computer lab with Detective Vans and the tech specialist. The atmosphere was tense as they all crowded around the monitor, watching the hourly updated security camera feed. The tech specialist had identified through the GPS tracker that the ship was approximately 120 miles offshore, heading south-southeast. "We've got a visual on the vessel," the tech specialist said, fingers flying across the keyboard. "Based on their current speed and trajectory, they're moving away from US waters quickly." Detective Vans immediately sprung into action, phone pressed to his ear. "This is Detective Vans. I need immediate contact with the Port of Oakland Coast Guard and FBI. We have confirmed location of a suspected human trafficking vessel approximately 120 miles offshore, heading south-southeast." The Dawson family huddled closer together, watching as Vans coordinated the response. Dan reached for Ethan's hand, squeezing it tightly. "They're sending multiple vessels," Vans informed them after ending the call. "The Coast Guard is dispatching their fastest cutters, and they're coordinating with Navy aircraft for aerial surveillance. We're going to intercept them." "Will they make it in time?" Leah asked, her earlier skepticism replaced with urgent concern. "They have to," Ethan replied, eyes fixed on the blinking dot representing the ship and their mother. Minutes stretched into hours as they remained in the computer lab. The GPS tracker showed the Coast Guard vessels converging on the eastern horizon. Ethan paced the room while his siblings took turns getting coffee and snacks from the vending machines. Dan remained stoically in his wheelchair, refusing to leave even when Ellie suggested he should rest. "I'm not going anywhere until we know," he insisted. Suddenly, the security feed from the ship went dark. The screens displaying the workrooms and corridors where they had seen their mother went black. "What happened?" Mark demanded, rushing to the tech specialist's side. "I don't know," the specialist replied, typing frantically. "The feed's just cut out." "Is it a technical problem?" Detective Vans asked, leaning over the specialist's shoulder. "Possibly, but unlikely. This could be deliberate. They might have cut the cameras." "The Coast Guard must have reached the ship," Ethan said hopefully. "They probably cut those lines as a safety measure to prevent anyone on board from being alerted to the raid." They waited in tense silence for updates. After what seemed like an eternity, Detective Vans's phone rang. His expression darkened as he listened to the caller. "What do you mean?" he asked sharply. "That's not possible." When he ended the call, the look on his face sent a chill through Ethan's body. "What is it?" he asked, dreading the answer. Vans sighed heavily. "The Coast Guard vessels have reached the coordinates, but there's no cargo ship. All they found was an abandoned boat tied or anchored in the ocean with the GPS tracker aboard. A man was found in the vessel, unconscious, believed to be the one who navigated it there." "What?" Dan's voice cracked with disbelief. "How is that possible?" "We saw the ship. We saw Catherine." Vans shook his head grimly. "They must have planned for this. These people are smart and work organized. They knew someone was asking about Elizabeth Carter, and they left immediately. They covered their tracks using the boat as a distraction, planting the GPS there but still updating the hourly security cam in the system. They don't even trust their own security guard," Vans continued. "Remember that the app system is compartmentalized. Not all information is available to everyone, even within their organization. The guard's access was limited." Ethan ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "So where's the cargo ship?" "Where's my mother?" "With how long it had left port, it couldn't have gotten very far," Vans replied. "I'm updating the Coast Guard and FBI about the security cam turning off, and the system logging out or blocking access from the guard's account. As Vans stepped away to make more calls, the Dawson family huddled closer together, waiting for news. Leah put her arm around Ellie, who was fighting back tears. Mark stood protectively near his father, while Aldi paced nervously, mimicking Ethan's earlier movements. When Vans returned, his expression was grave but determined. FBI said they need to regroup and discuss strategy. These people are smart and careful. They won't let themselves be found easily. He looked at each member of the Dawson family in turn. I can't let you go home now. It's too dangerous. We don't know if they would send someone after you. You should live in a temporary protection shelter until we resolve this situation. What? Dan's head snapped up. No, that's impossible. You can't take all 6 of us and put us in a shelter. We each have our own lives. Aldi has school, Mark has his job, Ellie has college classes. This is only temporary, Vans insisted. A week or 2 at most. Your safety has to be the priority. The siblings began protesting all at once, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of objections. We can't just disappear from our lives. What about Dad's medical appointments? I have exams coming up. Listen to Detective Vans, Ethan's voice cut through the chaos. Please, we need to do this. Mark turned on his brother, anger flashing in his eyes. This is your fault. Things got worse because you handled things on your own and made a mess. If you had just left it alone. Left it alone? Ethan stepped toward Mark, fists clenched. Left Mom alone for another 14 years, is that what you wanted? Officers quickly moved between the brothers as Ellie cried out, Stop it! We can't fight each other now. The most important thing is to get proper rest somewhere safe until there's another update. The tension in the room was palpable as the brothers glared at each other. Finally, Vans handed them off to another officer, who was tasked with finding a temporary residence for them. Make sure they're comfortable, Vans instructed. They've been through enough. Just then, the station door opened and several people in suits entered, FBI agents. Vans greeted them, and they went straight into the conference hall. We'll update you with a new search strategy as soon as we have one, an FBI agent assured the family. Another officer approached them. Please come with me. I'll drive you to your temporary shelter. Through the windows, Ethan could see it was getting dark outside. 2 patrol cars and a police van waited for them in the parking lot. The family gathered their few belongings and followed the officer, leaving the station with heavy hearts but a renewed determination to find Catherine Dawson. The police van pulled up to a modest house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The officer explained that it was a safe house kept by the department for situations exactly like theirs. It was located in a gated community with regular police patrols and security cameras at all entrances. As they entered, Ethan was surprised to find it wasn't the sparse institutional setting he had imagined. Instead, it was a comfortable family home with enough bedrooms to accommodate all of them, an open kitchen with a fully stocked pantry and basic necessities. It's not too bad, Leah admitted as she inspected the living room. The furniture was slightly dated but clean and comfortable. The officer handed Dan a folder containing information about the property. This area is well protected, so you may leave for groceries or a short walk if needed. However, we strongly advise that you don't go too far out of the area. Remember, this is temporary and for your safety. How long do we need to stay here? Mark asked, still visibly unhappy with the situation. Detective Vans suggested a week or 2 at most. We'll update you daily on the investigation, the officer replied. He handed them each a business card with his contact information. Call this number if you need anything or notice anything suspicious. After the police left, the family began to settle in, each choosing a bedroom. The air was tense, filled with unspoken questions and simmering emotions. Leah and Aldi went to the kitchen to inventory the pantry. If we're going to live here for a few weeks, we obviously need more than what's been prepared, Leah noted, making a list. We should get fresh fruits, vegetables, meat. And snacks, Aldi added. This place only has healthy stuff. Ethan, overwhelmed by both his family and the thought of spending every minute with them, retreated to his chosen room. He closed the door and sat heavily on the bed, exhaustion washing over him. But rest wouldn't come. Instead, he pulled out a notebook from his backpack and began making a mind map, connecting all the information he had learned about his mother's disappearance. He wrote down names, Raymond Doss, Harvey Doss, Ronald, and circled them, drawing lines to other facts: the warehouse, the eastern horizon, the fake identity, Elizabeth Carter. There had to be a pattern, some clue they had missed. Ethan was determined to find it. Hours passed as he worked, adding details from memory of the documents Detective Vans had shown him. He was so absorbed that he didn't hear the knock at first. "Ethan?" Leah called through the door. "Dinner's ready." Hungry despite his preoccupation, Ethan joined his family at the dining table. The meal was simple: pasta with jarred sauce and frozen garlic bread that Leah and Aldi had found in the freezer. But it was the first real food they'd had all day. They had just begun eating when Ethan's phone rang. Seeing Detective Vans's number, he quickly put it on speaker so everyone could listen. "I wanted to update you all," the detective began without preamble. "We've put together a plan with FBI and Coast Guard. Based on our discussion, we believe the ship must have sailed to Ensenada, Baja California, Mexico." "Mexico?" Dan echoed. "That's quite a distance." "It's approximately 600 miles south by sea from Oakland," Vans confirmed. "There's a major port there that has been tied to smuggling operations in the past. It would be the perfect place for a freighter trying to vanish after leaving the port of Oakland, or to offload people before disappearing into international waters or inland networks." "Are there other places they could have sailed?" Ethan asked. "Theoretically, yes," Vans replied. "But from the port report we have, based on the direction the ship traveled, how many hours have passed, and what the cargo ship carried and their destination, it all points to Ensenada." "What's happening now?" Mark asked, his practical nature asserting itself. "We've already contacted Interpol and Mexican Federal Police to stand by at the port," Vans explained. "The ship should arrive in approximately 10 hours. We've also contacted and dispatched Navy vessels in that direction. They'll be surrounded from all sides." The family exchanged hopeful glances across the table. "Thank you for everything you're doing, Detective," Dan said, his voice filled with emotion. "I'll call again tomorrow with any updates," Vans promised before ending the call. The family finished their dinner in anxious but hopeful silence. For the first time since discovering his mother's car in the lake, Ethan felt they were making real progress. The pieces were finally coming together. As he helped clear the dishes, he realized something else. Despite the tension and disagreements, they were working together as a family again. Mark had stopped glaring at him. Leah had softened her usually defensive posture. Even Dan seemed more present, more engaged than he had been in years. "We should get some rest," Ellie suggested as they finished cleaning up. "Tomorrow might be a big day." Ethan nodded, returning to his room. But before trying to sleep, he added one more detail to his mind map. Ensenada, Mexico, with a question mark beside it. "Almost there, Mom," he whispered. "We're coming for you." Ever since that evening, the family had been living hope against hope. Hours passed, night turned to morning, and finally there was another update from Vans. Rather than calling, he visited them personally at the safe house so they wouldn't need to leave and go to the station. The detective's face as he entered didn't bring the news they had been hoping for. The Dawson family gathered in the living room, tension palpable as they waited for him to speak. "The cargo vessel docked in Ensenada early this morning," Vans began, his voice carefully measured. "Mexican authorities, with support from Interpol and U.S. agencies, conducted a raid and rescued several workers." "And our mother?" Ethan asked, leaning forward. Vans shook his head slowly. "I'm sorry, they couldn't find Elizabeth Carter, Catherine Dawson, or Ronald or Harvey Doss. It appears they must have fled and taken her with them, possibly using a smaller speedboat before the main vessel docked." The family's collective hope deflated like a punctured balloon. Ellie began to cry softly, while Aldi kicked at the coffee table in frustration. "How is that possible?" Dan demanded, his hands gripping the armrests of his wheelchair. "You said they would be surrounded." "There seems to have been a time gap between when the vessel docked and when the police intercepted it," Vans explained. "That allowed them to escape. Someone must have helped them from the port side." So they knew we were coming, Mark said bitterly. Again. The other workers were found, but not our mother, Leah observed, her analytical mind working through the implications. This seems intentional now, personal. They're holding her to make us pay because Ethan was the one who caused this. That's not fair, Ethan protested, though doubt crept into his voice. Had his actions made things worse for his mother? We've begun questioning the victims we rescued, Vance continued. Most of them are traumatized and need hospitalization. Many were exposed to drugs on the cargo ship to make them obedient and subdued. He paused, reaching into his jacket pocket. One of them, however, kept muttering a name, El Almacen. We found an envelope in her pocket. Vance handed it to Dan, who opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a photograph of Catherine, younger than she would be now, but unmistakably their wife and mother. On the back was written, El Almacen. What does it mean? Ellie asked, looking over her father's shoulder at the photograph. El Almacen means the warehouse in Spanish, Vance explained, and this letter can't be coincidental. They purposefully put it in the woman's pocket so we would find it. They're taunting us, Mark realized. It's bait, Vance agreed. They want us to find this El Almacen, but it could be a trap. It could be any warehouse where Dos and his men have prepared for our arrival in Ensenada, if we jump to it. I suggested we hold off until the victims were sober, and we could get more information from them. Maybe they know something about it. After Vance left, promising to update them as soon as he had more information, the family sat in stunned silence. The photograph of Catherine passed from hand to hand, each family member studying it as if it might reveal some hidden clue. Finally, Ethan stood up, determination etched on his face. I've had enough of this waiting. I'm going to search for Mom myself. What? Leah exclaimed. Didn't you hear what Detective Vance said? It's a trap. I don't care, Ethan replied. Every minute we wait here is another minute Mom is with those people. I'm going to Ensenada to find this warehouse. You can't just walk into a foreign country and start investigating on your own, Mark argued. You don't speak Spanish, you don't know the area, and you have no authority there. I'm going, Ethan insisted. Is anyone coming with me? I'll go, Aldi volunteered immediately. Absolutely not, Dan said firmly. You're 15 years old. You're not going anywhere near Mexico or these dangerous people. Someone needs to stay with Dad, Leah pointed out. I'll stay and take care of him, Ellie and Aldi. All eyes turned to Mark, who looked torn between his sense of responsibility and his concern for his mother. I'll go with Ethan, he finally said, surprising everyone. Ethan hesitated. Mark was the last person he expected to volunteer, especially after blaming him for their current situation. If anyone can handle him, it's Mark, Dan said with a nod of approval. You two watch each other's backs. The brothers began packing minimally, changes of clothes, toiletries, passports, and the photograph of their mother with El Almacen written on the back. Before leaving, Ethan addressed the family one last time. If the police ask where we've gone, tell them we left in the middle of the night when you were sleeping, he instructed. We don't want them stopping us before we even get started. Leah crossed her arms. I still don't like this. It feels too rushed, and I don't want to lose another one or two of my family. Ellie hugged both brothers tightly. Please, if you really must do this, be careful, she whispered, and bring Mum home. Ethan and Mark traveled to San Diego first, crossing the border into Mexico and then heading to Ensenada. The drive took several hours, during which they strategized their approach and developed a cover story. We should pose as journalists, Ethan suggested as they neared the coastal city. Researching maritime trafficking would give us a reason to be asking questions without raising too much suspicion. Mark nodded in agreement. That could work, but we need to be careful about showing Mum's photo. If these people are looking for us, they might recognize us as her sons. Ethan had already thought of this. We'll be selective about who we show it to. The photo is our only real lead, but we can't risk tipping off the wrong people. They checked into a modest hotel near the port area, choosing a room with a view of the harbor so they could observe ship movements. Ethan had printed photographs of Harvey Doss, Ronald, based on a license photo Detective Vans had shared, and El Cerro, the security guard from the warehouse. "We should split up the port into sections," Mark suggested, spreading a map on the bed. "Cover more ground that way." Ethan shook his head. "No, we stay together. These people are dangerous and we don't know who's working for them. We can't risk getting separated." Mark looked like he wanted to argue but ultimately agreed. "Fine. Where do we start?" "The docks. We talk to workers, mention El Almacen and see who reacts." The next morning they dressed in casual but professional attire, nothing too flashy that would draw attention, but neat enough to pass as journalists. They brought notepads, their phones for recording, and a small camera to complete the illusion. The port of Ensenada was busy with activity, cargo ships loading and unloading, fishing vessels bringing in the morning catch, tourists boarding cruise liners. Workers moved purposefully across the docks, forklifts transported pallets of goods, and seagulls circled overhead looking for scraps. Ethan and Mark approached several dock workers, introducing themselves as freelance journalists, researching maritime trafficking for an exposé. Most were reluctant to talk, giving brief answers before returning to their work. Others seemed genuinely unaware of any illegal activities. By midday they had made little progress and decided to stop for lunch at a small cantina near the port. "This isn't working," Mark said, picking at his food. "No one's talking." "We need to find someone who's not afraid," Ethan replied, scanning the cantina. His attention was caught by an older man sitting alone at the bar, watching the docks through the window. Something about his attentiveness, the way he observed rather than merely looked, struck Ethan as noteworthy. "Let's try him," Ethan suggested, nodding toward the man. They approached carefully, ordering drinks at the bar before striking up a conversation with the older man. He introduced himself simply as Javier and seemed amused by their journalist cover. "You boys aren't journalists," he said in accented English, sipping his beer, "but you're looking for something or someone." Ethan and Mark exchanged glances. "We're searching for information about maritime trafficking," Ethan maintained. Javier chuckled. "Many journalists come asking these questions. Few find what they seek." Taking a calculated risk, Ethan showed him the photos of Harvey Doss, Ronald, and El Cerro. "Have you seen any of these men around the port?" Javier studied the photos carefully before handing them back. "Perhaps. Why do you ask?" Mark leaned closer. "They're involved in something illegal. We're trying to expose their operation." "Dangerous men," Javier commented, finishing his beer, "especially for young journalists to pursue." Ethan decided to take an even bigger risk. He pulled out the photo of his mother with El Almacen written on the back. "We're looking for this woman too. She might be connected to a place called El Almacen." Javier's expression changed subtly. A flicker of recognition quickly masked. He stood, dropping money on the bar. "Traffickers often disappear inland after they reach here," he said quietly. "They won't linger around the port area. The cargo trucking route is often used to move people inland from the coast." He pointed toward the industrial section of the port. "If you want to know more, go to the warehouse where the containers are stored. Ask for Miguel. Tell him Javier sent you." With that, he left the cantina, disappearing into the crowd outside. Ethan and Mark followed his directions, making their way to the container storage area. The warehouse was massive, filled with shipping containers stacked 3 high in some places. Workers operated forklifts, moving containers onto trucks for distribution. As they approached the entrance, a man in a hard hat stopped them. "This is a restricted area," he said in Spanish, then switched to English when he saw their confused expressions. "No public access." "We're looking for Miguel," Ethan explained. "Javier sent us." The man's expression remained neutral. "What are you doing here?" "We're journalists," Mark replied, sticking to their cover story, "researching maritime trafficking." Ethan showed him the photograph of Catherine. "We're trying to find this missing woman. We heard about a place called El Almacen that might be connected to her disappearance." The man studied them for a moment before responding. "There are several warehouses known as El Almacen in this area. I could drive you with my truck to show you." As he turned to lead them toward his vehicle, Ethan felt a momentary sense of triumph. They were making progress at last. But that feeling vanished instantly as something hard struck the back of his head and darkness rushed in to claim him. The next moment Ethan opened his eyes, he was in a very dark room, so dark that opening his eyes wasn't any different than closing them. His head throbbed with pain, and his arms and legs felt strangely heavy. As consciousness fully returned, he realized he was tied to a chair, his wrists bound behind him and ankles secured to the chair legs. "Mark," he called out, his voice muffled by what he now realized was a gag in his mouth. There was no reply. Panic began to set in as Ethan struggled against his restraints, the chair scraping slightly against what felt like a metal floor. Suddenly, a blinding light switched on overhead. Ethan blinked painfully, trying to adjust to the sudden brightness. As his vision cleared, he found himself inside what appeared to be a shipping container. The walls were bare metal with no windows and only a single door at one end. That door now opened, and a man stepped inside. The same man who had greeted them at the warehouse, the one they had asked about El Almacén. "Hello, Mr. Dawson," the man said in perfect English, pulling up another chair to sit facing Ethan. "I hope you're comfortable." He reached forward and removed the gag from Ethan's mouth. "Who are you?" Ethan demanded immediately. "Where's my brother?" "You can call me Ronald," the man replied, watching Ethan's reaction carefully. "Yes, I know who you are, Ethan Dawson. And I know why you're here." Ethan's blood ran cold at the name. Ronald, the same name on the sunglasses found in his mother's car, the man Detective Vance had mentioned, the one who supposedly worked for Harvey Doss. "Are you one of Harvey Doss's men?" Ethan asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Where is my brother? Where is my mother?" Ronald smiled thinly. "People here don't know me under that name, but yes, I work closely with Harvey." He leaned forward, studying Ethan with cold, calculating eyes. "I've been waiting to meet you, wondering if and when you would show up after we gave you a bite of a clue. The photograph in the woman's jacket. And here you are, quicker than I estimated." "Where is my family?" Ethan repeated, anger overriding his fear. "Your brother is safe for now," Ronald replied dismissively. "As for your mother, well, she's been with us for 14 years. A few more hours won't make much difference, will it?" Ethan strained against his restraints, fury building within him. "Let us go. The police know we're here. Detective Vance and the FBI are—" Ronald laughed, cutting him off. "No one knows you're here, Ethan. You made sure of that when you told your family to lie about your departure. Your brother told us. Very thoughtful of you." He stood up, adjusting his jacket. "Harvey has been dying to meet you. He'll want to handle you personally." With that, Ronald stepped out of the container, returning moments later with 3 armed guards. They untied Ethan from the chair but kept his hands bound behind his back. 2 guards gripped his arms firmly as they led him out of the container. Outside, Ethan was astonished to find himself in what appeared to be a complex maze of shipping containers, stacked and arranged to form corridors and rooms. Some were connected with makeshift doorways cut into their sides, others stacked to create walls around open spaces. The entire structure resembled a bizarre industrial labyrinth. They marched him through this maze, taking so many turns that Ethan quickly lost his sense of direction. Finally, they stopped at another container, indistinguishable from the one he had been in except for a number painted on its side, 14. One of the guards opened the door and Ethan was shoved inside. This container was larger and better lit than his previous confinement. Inside he found Mark, similarly bound but seated on a bench rather than a chair. Beside him, also bound, was a woman Ethan recognized immediately, despite the 14 years that had passed. "Mom," he whispered, his voice breaking. Catherine Dawson looked up at her son, her eyes widening in recognition. She appeared much older than her 51 years, her once vibrant brown hair now streaked with grey, her face lined with stress and hardship. But most disturbing was the flat, almost vacant expression in her eyes, as if she were looking at Ethan through a fog. Standing near them was another man, surrounded by more guards. He was in his early 40s, well dressed in contrast to the utilitarian clothing of his men, with sharp features and cold eyes that assessed Ethan with clinical interest. "Harvey Doss," Ethan said, recognizing him from the photographs they had found during their investigation. "Ethan Dawson," Harvey replied with a slight nod. "The persistent son who wouldn't let sleeping dogs lie. I've heard a lot about you." Ethan hardly registered Harvey's words, his attention fixed on his mother and brother. Mark appeared relatively unharmed but scared, with a bruise forming on his cheek. Their mother seemed physically uninjured, but her vacant stare suggested she might be under the influence of drugs. Perhaps the same ones Vance had mentioned were used to keep the workers subdued. "Let them go," Ethan demanded, trying to sound commanding despite his vulnerable position. "You have me now. That's what you wanted, isn't it?" Harvey chuckled. "You're a very predictable man, Ethan. I knew someone like you would bite at the first opportunity. People driven by emotion rather than logic are so easy to manipulate." He approached Ethan slowly, hands clasped behind his back. "But you're right about one thing. I did want to meet you. I wanted to see the man who's been causing me so much trouble these past few days." "I will cause you much more than trouble if you don't release my family," Ethan threatened, though he knew his position gave his words little weight. "I intend to negotiate," Harvey replied, surprisingly direct. "I'll release your mother, but in exchange I want Mark, and I want you to stop talking to the US police. We can stage something believable for them, how your mother finally returned to you after 14 years of captivity elsewhere." "What?" Ethan was stunned by the suggestion. "You want to keep my brother as a hostage? That's insane. The police will still look for him." "Not if you tell them he decided to stay in Mexico. Perhaps he fell in love or found a job opportunity. People disappear by choice all the time, as your family once believed your mother did." Ethan shook his head vehemently. "I refuse. I won't trade one family member for another." "Then perhaps I keep both," Harvey said with a shrug. "Or all three of you. I'm being generous, Ethan. Don't mistake this for weakness." "The police will find us," Ethan insisted. "Interpol and Mexican authorities rescued the workers from your ship. They'll find this place too." Harvey laughed, a cold sound devoid of humor. "Do you think the local police would be on their feet without my support? I sacrificed those workers, handing them to the police to buy my men some time to get away. But those people, I doubt they could live in the free world after all this time here. They'll soon pile another debt, looking for another easy way out, and come back here on our lap." "You won't get away with this," Ethan said, the cliché sounding hollow even to his own ears. "Think about my offer," Harvey replied, unmoved by Ethan's defiance. "But do not hope for any rescue as long as you are here. After all, this is El Almacen, and I control everything within these walls." He nodded to his guards. "Take him back to his container. Let him consider his options." As Ethan was dragged away, he looked back at his mother, their eyes meeting briefly. Despite the drugged haze, he thought he saw a flicker of recognition. Of the mother he remembered. It gave him a small spark of hope that she was still there, beneath whatever they had done to suppress her will. "I'll get us out of here," he called to Mark and his mother, as the guards pulled him from the container. "I promise." Ethan was taken back to his room by the 3 guards led by Ronald. He looked into his mother's eyes the last time and saw the empty stare, a flat, cold expression, as if she was under influence. Once inside, Ronald chained him to the makeshift bed again, then stood watching him with clinical interest. "You should think carefully about Harvey's offer," Ronald advised, leaning against the container wall. "He might not have mentioned this, but he isn't a very patient man, not like his father." Ethan desperately searched for his personal belongings, his phone, wallet, passport, but they were nowhere in sight. They must have been confiscated while he was unconscious. "If I agreed, how would I know you'd let my mother go? Why would Harvey trust me not to go to the police as soon as we're free?" Ethan asked, trying to gather information. Ronald smiled thinly. Harvey was not like his father. His father feared the police, was calculating, and always thought of profit. But this one... He tapped his temple. "This one is a real sportsman. This is all a game to him." He moved closer to Ethan, lowering his voice conspiratorially. And you wouldn't like to know what that man would do if he suspected you of cooperating with the police. We have eyes everywhere. Even now, we know where the police keep your family at that protection house. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. Just how powerful are you people? Ronald didn't answer directly, merely offering another cold smile before departing, the heavy metal door clanging shut behind him. Left alone, Ethan tried to make sense of his surroundings. The container was bare except for the cot he was chained to and a small bucket in the corner that he assumed served as a toilet. There was no window, no way to tell the time or even whether it was day or night. Time seemed to pass in a blur. Without his watch or phone, Ethan could only guess how long he had been captive. His mind wandered everywhere. Where could he be? What kind of structure would allow for this maze of containers? How was his family doing? They must be searching for him and Mark by now because neither of them could answer their calls. Would they tell Vans they were gone? Vans would realize something was wrong if he called and couldn't reach them, right? Ethan paced the small space as much as his chains would allow, trying to formulate an escape plan. The container was solid metal, the door secured from the outside. His restraints were tight, professional. These people clearly had experience in keeping prisoners. Eventually, exhaustion claimed him, and he fell into a fitful sleep filled with dreams of his mother's vacant stare and Harvey Doss's cold laughter. When he woke, Ronald was standing over him, ready to take him to see Harvey again. This time, however, he was alone, without the 3 guards from before. "Get up," Ronald ordered. "Harvey wants to see if you've reconsidered his offer." As Ronald leaned close to undo the chains connecting Ethan to the bed, Ethan caught sight of a phone on Ronald's belt. The screen was illuminated, showing what appeared to be a messaging application, perhaps the same secure system the guard had given them access to at the police station. A desperate plan formed in Ethan's mind. If he could somehow get hold of that phone, even for a moment, he might be able to send a message or his location to Detective Vans. After 14 years, he had memorized Vans's contact number personally, having called him countless times during the investigation into his mother's disappearance. Ethan feigned cooperation, allowing Ronald to help him up. As they stood close together, he deliberately stumbled, bumping against Ronald in an attempt to reach for the phone. But Ronald shifted position, moving the phone out of reach. "Careful there," Ronald said, steadying Ethan with a firm grip. "Don't try anything stupid." Ethan nodded, swallowing his disappointment. He would need another opportunity, a better moment when Ronald wasn't so alert. They walked down the corridor of containers again, taking the same route as before. Ethan tried to memorize every turn, building a mental map of the complex. The place didn't seem as big as he had initially thought. The containers were just connected to create an illusion of size and complexity. But who knows? When they entered the container where Harvey waited, Ethan was surprised to find that Mark wasn't present this time. Only his mother and Harvey remained. Catherine still appeared drowsy, her eyes unfocused, but she was conscious. "Ah, Ethan," Harvey greeted him with false warmth. "Have you had time to think about my generous offer?" "Where's my brother?" Ethan demanded immediately. "Considering other accommodations," Harvey replied vaguely. "Don't worry about him. Worry about your answer." Ethan stood his ground. "My answer is still no, I won't leave either of them behind." Harvey sighed theatrically. "Your mother wasn't always like this, you know. When she was sober, she worked very efficiently, doing registration and data entry for fake documents, arranging all the logistics to transport people who wanted to disappear. She helped many desperate people start new lives." "What did she do to end up here?" Ethan asked, his curiosity overwhelming his anger for a moment. "She owed me $30,000, Harvey replied casually, "to pay for your father's medical bills after his accident, but she couldn't pay it back. As per the agreement in our contract, she had to serve here until the debt was paid." "She's worked long enough," Ethan argued. 14 years. She must have paid that debt many times over." Harvey shrugged. "I did your mother a kindness by letting her keep working. We don't just dispose of people when they become inconvenient. There's no way out of here without my permission." He studied Ethan for a moment, head tilted slightly. I'll give you 3 more days to think about my deal. If you say yes, we will let you and your mother go, give you a new place to live. But Mark stays here. With a malicious smile, he added, you might be interested to know that Mark has considered leaving you here and going home with your mother. He told me he doesn't like you much. You're just trying to provoke us, Ethan snapped, playing mind games. Perhaps, Harvey conceded, but 3 days is all you get. After that, I might withdraw my offer entirely. He nodded to Ronald. Return him to his room. On the way back to his container, Ronald was briefly distracted by a conversation with another worker about a shipment schedule. Ethan seized the chance, swiftly snatching the phone from Ronald's belt and tucking it behind his own at the front, despite the limited movement caused by the cuff. Heart pounding, he maintained a neutral expression as Ronald finished his conversation and continued escorting him down the corridor. When they reached his container, Ronald secured him to the bed again and left, apparently unaware of the theft. As soon as he was alone, Ethan pulled out the phone, fingers trembling with urgency. The battery was at 15%. He didn't have much time. Opening the messaging application, he quickly typed Detective Vance's number and sent a ping location with a rescue note that simply read, Ethan and Mark, need immediate rescue. Container maze at port. Mother here too. Then, with practiced movements from his teenage shoplifting days, he deleted the message from the sent folder and cleared the recent contacts. If he was lucky, Ronald wouldn't notice the message had been sent before discovering his phone was missing. Ethan had just hidden the phone behind him when the door opened again. Ronald stormed in, face red with anger. Where is it? He demanded, searching the small space frantically. Where's what? Ethan replied, feigning innocence. My phone. I had it when I brought you back. After a moment of aggressive searching, Ronald spotted the phone beneath Ethan, where he had laid on it. He grabbed it, checking it carefully for any signs of tampering. What did you do to it? He demanded, scrolling through the apps. Nothing yet, Ethan replied, hoping Ronald wouldn't check the phone's battery usage or data transmission logs. Ronald examined the phone for several tense minutes before apparently satisfied that Ethan hadn't managed to use it. I warned you. Do not try anything funny. With a final warning glare, he left the container, slamming the door behind him. Ethan exhaled slowly, allowing himself a small flicker of hope. The message had been sent. Now all he could do was wait and hope that Detective Vance would understand and act quickly. Ethan hadn't been alone for more than an hour when he heard commotion outside, shouting voices, the sound of running feet. Ronald burst into the container, accompanied by 2 armed men. Move now, Ronald ordered, his voice tight with urgency. The men roughly unchained Ethan from the bed and dragged him to his feet. What's happening? Ethan asked, though he suspected, hoped, he knew the answer. Shut up and move, one of the men snapped, shoving him toward the door. They rushed him through the container maze, taking different turns than before, moving deeper into the complex. Eventually, they reached a container that appeared to be connected to a vehicle of some kind. Inside, Ethan found Mark already there, bound and gagged. Ethan! Mark managed to call through his gag when he saw his brother. The container door slammed shut behind them, and Ethan felt movement. The container was being loaded onto what he guessed was a truck, but he wasn't sure. The armed men remained inside with them, weapons trained on the brothers. What did you do? Mark asked when one of the men removed his gag. They're in a panic out there. I sent our location to Detective Vance, Ethan whispered back. I stole Ronald's phone. Mark's eyes widened. Is that what this is all about? They're moving us? Why did you keep doing those impulsive things? They could have killed us. Quiet, one of the guards barked, raising his weapon threateningly. The brothers fell silent as the container continued to move. Ethan noticed that Mark's restraints were looser than his own. Apparently, the men had moved so quickly they hadn't secured him properly. Can you get free? Ethan mouthed silently when the guards weren't looking directly at them. Mark gave an almost imperceptible nod, subtly working at his bindings. The container's movement continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 minutes. Then came a different sensation, the rocking motion of water. They were on a ship. "Where are they taking us?" Ethan wondered aloud. "I said quiet," the guard repeated, striking Ethan across the face with the back of his hand. Suddenly, the container came to a stop. The guards tensed, listening to sounds outside. There was shouting, then what sounded unmistakably like gunshots. One guard moved to the container door, cracking it open slightly to look outside. A burst of gunfire sent him stumbling backward, blood blossoming on his chest. The second guard raised his weapon, but in that moment of distraction, Mark made his move. Having freed his hands, he lunged at the guard, grappling for the gun. They struggled briefly before Mark managed to knock the man unconscious with a powerful blow to the head. "Quick, untie me," Ethan urged. Mark worked on Ethan's restraints, his hands shaking with adrenaline. "They must have tracked the phone signal," he said as he freed his brother. "That was smart thinking." "We need to find Mom," Ethan said, retrieving the fallen guard's weapon. "She must be somewhere on this ship." Cautiously, they approached the container door and opened it slightly. What they saw took their breath away. They were indeed on a ship, a cargo vessel now surrounded by smaller Coast Guard boats. A helicopter circled overhead, its spotlight sweeping across the deck. Armed officers were boarding the ship from multiple points, engaging in firefights with Harvey's men. "We need to be careful," Mark warned. "They don't know we're friendlies." They slipped out of the container, staying low to avoid both the gunfire and detection. From their position, they could see Ronald crouched behind a stack of pallets, unaware of their escape. Ethan spotted a metal pole lying nearby and grabbed it. With Mark providing cover, he circled around and approached Ronald from behind, striking him hard enough to render him unconscious. As they moved across the deck, staying in the shadows, Ethan spotted Detective Vans among the boarding officers. He was advancing with his weapon drawn, leading a team toward what appeared to be the ship's command center. Suddenly, Harvey appeared from behind a container, gun in hand. He fired twice, catching Vans in the chest. The detective went down, but not before firing back, his bullet striking Harvey directly in the chest. "Detective!" Ethan shouted, starting forward. A Coast Guard officer spotted them. "Civilians, take cover!" he yelled, rushing to their position. "Identify yourselves." "I'm Ethan Dawson. This is my brother Mark," Ethan explained rapidly. "We were kidnapped. Detective Vans was coming to rescue us. Our mother is somewhere on this ship, Catherine Dawson." The officer spoke into his radio, confirming their identities. "The woman has been located and secured," he informed them. "She's being treated by medical personnel. You two need to come with me. The ship isn't fully secure yet." "What about Detective Vans?" Ethan asked, looking toward where the detective had fallen. "Medics are with him now," the officer replied, "but we need to get you to safety immediately." As they were escorted across the deck, they passed Harvey's body. The man responsible for their mother's 14-year disappearance lay still, eyes open but unseeing, a pool of blood spreading beneath him. Ethan felt no satisfaction at his death, only a hollow relief that his reign of terror was over. The officer led them to a Coast Guard vessel, where paramedics were treating several rescued individuals. Among them, on a stretcher being prepared for helicopter evacuation, was their mother. "Mom," they cried in unison, rushing to her side. Catherine was conscious but disoriented, her eyes struggling to focus on their faces. A paramedic explained she had been given tranquilizers and would need time to fully recover. "We're going to airlift her to the hospital immediately," the paramedic explained. "You can accompany her if you wish." As they prepared to board the medical helicopter, Ethan saw Ronald being led away in handcuffs, his face a mask of hatred as he glared at the Dawson brothers. The paramedic helicopter soon arrived, and they watched as Vans was loaded aboard first, medical staff working frantically to stabilize him. Then Catherine was carefully transferred, with Ethan and Mark climbing in beside her. As the helicopter lifted off from the cargo ship, Ethan looked down at the scene below. Coast Guard vessels surrounding the ship, officers securing the remaining criminals, medical teams attending to other victims. After 14 years, the nightmare was finally ending. The hospital corridor buzzed with activity as medical staff rushed between rooms. attending to the multiple patients who had been brought in from the raid on the cargo ship. Ethan and Mark sat side by side in uncomfortable plastic chairs outside the emergency department, waiting for news. "Family of Detective Vans," a doctor called, approaching them with a clipboard. "We're not family, but we're with him," Ethan explained, standing quickly. "How is he?" "He survived the surgery," the doctor reported. "The bullet caused some internal bleeding, but we were able to control it. He'll need time to recover, but the prognosis is good." Relief washed over Ethan. "Can we see him?" "He's still unconscious from the anesthesia. It will be several hours before he wakes up. I suggest you get some rest yourselves." Ethan nodded gratefully. "And our mother, Catherine Dawson." "She's stable," the doctor assured them. "The drugs in her system are being cleared gradually. We're monitoring her carefully, but physically, she appears to be in relatively good health considering the circumstances." Another doctor approached them. "Your mother has been moved to a private room. She's resting now, but you can see her if you'd like." Ethan and Mark followed the doctor down the corridor to a small but comfortable room. Catherine lay in the bed, an IV in her arm, and monitoring equipment beside her. Her eyes were closed, her breathing steady, her face relaxed in sleep. She looked older than her years, the 14 years of captivity evident in the lines on her face and the grey streaking her once brown hair. "Mum," Ethan whispered, taking her hand gently. To his surprise, her fingers curled around his and her eyes fluttered open. "Ethan," she murmured, her voice raspy from disuse. "Mark? Is it really you?" "It's us, Mum," Mark confirmed, moving to her other side. "You're safe now. Harvey is dead. Ronald is in custody. It's over." "My boys," she said weakly, tears forming in her eyes. "You're all grown up." Before they could talk further, a nurse entered, explaining that Catherine needed rest and that they could speak more when she was stronger. Reluctantly, the brothers left her side, promising to return soon. In the waiting area, they found a police officer who informed them that their family had been notified and were on their way to the hospital. Within the hour, Dan, Leah, Ellie and Aldi arrived, escorted by another officer, the same one who had driven them to the shelter house. The reunion was emotional and chaotic, tears, hugs, exclamations of relief and disbelief. Dan was wheeled directly to Catherine's room, the others waiting outside to give them privacy for their first meeting in 14 years. "How did you find us?" Ethan asked the officer. "Detective Vans received your message and immediately mobilized every available resource," the officer explained. "The phone's location data led us right to the container complex. We arrived just as they were moving you to the ship." Hours passed as the family waited, taking turns visiting Catherine and checking on Detective Vans. Finally, in the early evening, a nurse informed them that Vans was awake and asking for Ethan. Ethan entered the detective's room quietly, mindful of his condition. Vans lay propped up slightly on pillows, his normally robust frame looking diminished in the hospital bed. An IV dripped steadily beside him, and monitors beeped softly. "Ethan," Vans said weakly, extending his hand. "You did it, son." Ethan took the detective's hand, his own emotions threatening to overwhelm him. "We did it together. You saved us." "I just followed the breadcrumbs you left," Vans replied with a pained smile. "That was quick thinking with the phone." "I'm not too proud of it. It was from my shoplifting days when I was younger. But I guess the impulse is still there," Ethan said. "How badly are you hurt?" he asked, noticing the detective's pale complexion. "I've had worse," Vans lied unconvincingly. "They tell me I'll make a full recovery, just need some time off. Maybe I'll finally take that fishing trip I've been putting off for years." They talked briefly about the operation, how the Coast Guard had surrounded the ship, how Ronald and several other key members of Harvey's organization had been captured, how the investigation was expanding to identify all involved parties. "What's going to happen to Ronald?" Ethan asked. Vans's expression hardened slightly. "He's facing a laundry list of charges: kidnapping, human trafficking, forced labor, assault, drug trafficking, document fraud. The prosecutor is confident he'll be looking at 30 years to life, especially with the testimony from your mother and the other victims." Ethan nodded, satisfied. "There's something else you should know. When I was captive, Ronald told me they had eyes everywhere. He said they even knew where the police were keeping my family at the protection house. Vance's eyebrows shot up. That suggests there might be a mole in the department or someone with access to our systems. That's what I thought too, Ethan confirmed. We'll take this very seriously, Vance assured him. I'll have internal affairs conduct a thorough investigation. We'll find whoever leaked that information. He paused, studying Ethan carefully. Thank you for telling me this. It could have compromised the entire operation if we'd missed it. After a moment of silence, Vance continued with a wry smile. You know, this is exactly why we don't let civilians handle things by themselves. You could have gotten yourself and your brother killed. I'm deeply sorry, Ethan said, realizing his impulsive decision had put Detective Vance in this position. But if I hadn't, he began to protest. I know, Vance interrupted, his tone softening. You found your mother when none of us could, but next time, and I sincerely hope there isn't a next time, maybe consider calling for backup before charging headfirst into danger. Ethan smiled sheepishly. I'll try to remember that. You either need to quit doing that impulsive thing where you take matters into your own hands, Vance said with a chuckle that turned into a pained wince, or we're going to have to enroll you in the police academy. You've got good instincts, son. Is that a job offer, Detective? Ethan asked, surprised. Let's call it a thought to consider, Vance replied. The force could use someone with your determination. Think about it while I'm recovering. Your mother and the other victims will need time, Vance cautioned as Ethan prepared to leave. Long-term captivity and drugging. It leaves scars that aren't always visible. We'll get her whatever help she needs, Ethan promised, and the others too. Back in the waiting area, Ethan found his family huddled together, talking quietly. Dan had returned from Catherine's room, his eyes red from crying but a peace on his face that Ethan hadn't seen in 14 years. She asked for all of us, Dan told them. She wants to see her children together. They entered Catherine's room as a group, Dan in his wheelchair beside the bed, the 5 siblings gathered around. Catherine was sitting up now, looking more alert though still frail. My family, she said, her voice stronger than before. I never thought I'd see you all together again. We never stopped looking for you, Mom, Ethan told her, though in truth he had been the only one who never gave up the search. I tried to escape many times in the beginning, Catherine explained, her voice breaking, but they threatened to hurt you all if I didn't cooperate. They showed me photos of you, of Dan in his wheelchair, of the children at school. Said they had people watching you. It's all over now, Dan assured her, taking her hand. You're safe, we're together again. Tell me about yourselves, Catherine requested, looking at her children with wonder. Tell me everything I've missed. One by one they shared highlights of their lives, Mark's accounting career, Leah's bookstore management, Ellie's college studies, Aldi's growth from infant to teenager. Ethan spoke last, describing his relentless search for her over the years, his refusal to believe she had abandoned them. I knew you would be the one, Catherine said, squeezing Ethan's hand. The stubborn one, the one who wouldn't let go. As they talked, Ethan reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. 14 years of pain, of broken trust and fractured relationships within the family. The way they had each coped with their mother's disappearance, Mark becoming practical and responsible, Leah hardening herself against disappointment, Ellie channeling her energy into caring for their father, Aldi growing up without memories of his mother, and Ethan himself clinging to his belief in his mother's love, refusing to accept what seemed obvious to everyone else. That faith had ultimately led them here, to this hospital room where a family torn apart by criminal greed was beginning to heal. There would be challenges ahead, he knew. Catherine would need intensive therapy to recover from her ordeal. The family would need to rebuild relationships strained by 14 years of absence and misunderstanding. The legal aftermath of dismantling Harvey Doss's operation would likely involve them all in investigations and testimonies. But looking around at his reunited family, his father's face alight with joy, his siblings gathered close, his mother alive and free, Ethan felt a profound sense of peace. The search that had consumed half his life was over. The truth, painful though it was, had finally come to light. As the evening deepened into night, the family remained together, sharing stories, tears, and cautious laughter. Outside the hospital window, stars appeared in the clear sky, countless points of light emerging from darkness, guiding those below toward home.